Hi, everybody. I have not done a Facebook Live in a while, so hello. I've been reading a lot about ChatGPT and like how bad it is for people who are struggling with not seeing things clearly because of mental health issues, and how often ChatGPT will just kind of spiral you into increasingly more intense and delusional flights of fancy, just kind of saying that you're so smart, nobody understands you, this is why things are going well or not going well, is because you're just too brilliant to be understood. Even when people think that ChatGPT is being objective, it's really very affirming. When you see screenshots, the most it'll ever say is kind of, you're so complex that, you know, that you understand things differently than others, and you're so smart, and you're so this and that. So that's bad. So obviously don't use ChatGPT as your therapist. I have a whole podcast coming out about that. But also try not to go to therapy that's like that. Because if you're going to therapy just to get a listening ear, that's one thing, right? But make sure you know that that's what it is. You then want supportive listening, right? If all you want is supportive listening, somebody to say, that's really hard, okay, like I get the role of that, that's fine. But there's a lot of people that are going into work on relationship issues, and that's a lot of what we see at my practice, right? At Best Life Behavioral Health. We do therapy and coaching, and I do myself therapy and coaching. If your therapist is like always on your side and everybody else is wrong, then your therapist just being ChatGPT, and they're not challenging you. And there could be multiple reasons for that. They could have tried to challenge you and you just like can't deal with that, and you get very defensive and your guard goes up, and so then they think, okay, well, can't really do that with this person, better that they come in than not come in and get some possibly tools to deal with what they're dealing with, but they obviously can't be challenged. Their worldview can't be challenged because they get defensive, argumentative, angry, loud, etc., right? Or they just ignore it completely. The other reason is that, therapists are just people, right? So if somebody is not very experienced and is just not trained in, it's just like if you haven't had certain life experiences and you're a conflict averse person, then you may not even think that there's a different side than the one that your client is giving you, especially if you over identify with that client. And this happens a lot with estrangement. I may be writing a book on estrangement, but either way, parents will go in and they find kind of a similar age therapist, a peer, and they basically talk about that the child is wrong, and that it's a societal shift and this is a trend, and my child is just being over dramatic, and like the therapist thinks that too. So then nobody's helping that parent client look at it differently and say, what do I contribute? And one thing that's super valuable for changing the frame, if you really do want an objective therapy experience, is having your spouse or your parent or like anybody go into your therapist, right? Because every time, and I do this now regularly with my own therapy and coaching clients, almost always I ask, can I have a session with your spouse? Because I didn't used to do that. It's not really how people are trained to be most of the time. As you are longer in practice, many of us start to do this, start to have a session where you can assess from the horse's mouth. You can ask the spouse, so, what do you think of the marriage? And frequently they will say stuff that it's not like your client was lying. They're just seeing things through their lens, right? And this is what ChatGPT does, right? It only knows the information you feed it, so it's going to make positive and affirming conclusions that put you in the best light based on what you say. And if your therapist is doing that too, then you end up kind of in an echo chamber where you feel increasingly just more and more right. Like you're just so right, and you forget that your spouse, if they came in, and you're not doing this intentionally, you're not lying, but their lens is completely different. So for example, like somebody will come in and they'll say, my spouse mistreats me, my spouse mistreats me. And if the spouse comes in, they'll say, it's been bad since he's lost his job. Client didn't even say he lost his job. Like, that's obviously a dramatic example, but one that happens. Or, yes, we've been in conflict ever since, I found out that he was still drinking. Client didn't say he was still drinking. And of course, these are larger examples, but there are day-to-day examples where it's just like any movie, like my favorite TV series, The Affair, right? Where you see things from one person's perspective, then you see things completely differently from the other person's perspective. Neither of them is lying. This is just how humans are. You see it from your perspective. And if your therapist does not challenge you and instead acts like ChatGPT, what's going on? And so many say, okay, well, I'm not comfortable with my spouse coming in because that's my private space. Then don't work on the relationship, or at least don't tell yourself you're working on the relationship. It would be like going to get a massage and saying you went to the gym. Those are different activities. One of them is supposed to make you feel better, and one of them is you doing hard work. The massage can be a hard massage, but it's still not going to be running a few miles. It's just not. It's still not going to be lifting weight. So you got to decide. ChatGPT and therapy, that's primarily supportive listening. That's like going for a massage. So don't go for a massage and say that you went to the gym. Because if you really want to, quote, work on the relationship, you're not working on your relationship by having somebody subjectively collude with you. Their intention is good. Your intention is good. Everybody's intention is good, but they don't act as though you could be wrong. So then you kind of forget that you could be wrong. Wrong not in some sort of moral way sometimes, but even just that your perception is uniquely yours, but does not represent kind of what any man on the street, a reasonable person, might say if they watched a video of what went on in your home. Now, if you're super upset about the idea of maybe having a spouse come to session, then what about even just your emails or your text messages or anything like that? That could be useful as well. So like, for example, when people are dating on the dating apps, they'll be like, oh, these women/men are terrible. I write like the cutest messages and nobody writes back to me because all these people are terrible. And then I'll say, well, let me see, right? And these messages are like weird. It's going like down a rabbit hole and doing like 20 hours of extra work on somebody's favorite band and like dropping that casually into the first message. I'm making this up as I go because like this is nobody specifically, but I'm trying to riff off like Joe from You because I love that show. But like, let's say that happened. I would never know that unless I actually saw Exhibit A, the text messages. So if you want to, quote, work on yourself or work on the marriage or work on parenting or anything else, then understand that you are not doing work if you're just talking to ChatGPT or to somebody who affirms you and is a yes man, whether that's an AI or a real person. And instead, the more perspective taking that can be obtained, like, for example, when you do an ADHD assessment on a child, you don't just ask the child, hey, do you lose stuff? They're going to be like, no, I don't lose anything, right? Instead, you talk to both parents if involved. You talk to the teachers. You look at, you ask multiple teachers, by the way, not just one. And any other therapist, any other, like a coach, anybody. You try to get in as much data as possible from all these different sources. And they all do this battery of tests where they all observe the questions. Like, does this person lose things a lot? Do they, stop focusing after a while? Are they hard to get attention? Do they run around? If you just ask one person, the child, or like just the child's one parent, you're not going to get objective data. And you got to think about therapy the same way. Anytime you read anything on Reddit or you read anything online in a forum, you got to say to yourself, this is one person's perspective. I have absolutely no idea what the other person would say. The other person involved, in these am I the asshole type of things. There are so many pieces of information left out, and it's not intentional, but you just kind of got to go through your life thinking like a researcher, like, oh, like, is this a good experiment, or do I have just one data source, So that is really my PSA, because I see people increasingly spiral out with ChatGPT, and also, tell me about like prior therapy experiences that sound like the massage, not like the going to the gym. Here's a question, and I do take questions during these. I did have all that to say though, so I'm glad I did. Danny says, good morning. Been married to a dismissive avoidant for 8 years, together 12. So that means you're preoccupied attachment. Remember, I mean, as I'm saying, there isn't just one lens. So, avoidant marries preoccupied almost all the time. Really all the time, but, gotta say almost. She's been dismissive avoidant our entire relationship. In November, we had a family medical emergency with our 5-year-old daughter. While in the hospital, my wife was stressed, overwhelmed, and pulled away. Told me she no longer has any emotional room for me and no more physical intimacy, not just sex, but no cuddling, no hugs, no kissing. She said our relationship is not a priority and I just have to deal. I became anxiously attached. You were already anxiously attached if she's dismissive. And started needing more intimacy, not sex, but conversation and help processing. She pulled away, told me I need therapy. I've been going, and they're just teaching me to be avoidant myself. What's my next step? So that's actually a good question. A lot of preoccupied attachment people mistakenly think that secure behaviors look like avoidant behaviors because it's so unusual to you. So the idea of taking some space, not sharing every feeling, not constantly reassurance seeking, focusing on yourself, your interests, who you are as a person. If you've been anxiously attached, which is who's drawn to avoidant people, you are going to think of that as becoming avoidant. But in reality, hopefully, they're teaching you to grow securely attached, where you're an autonomous person and your mood just doesn't go up and down based on hers. She sounds like she had a massive stressor, as you did with this, your small child having a medical emergency. So if you were in any way in her mind making that worse with more clingy, preoccupied behaviors, then she felt incredibly overwhelmed. She already had her dismissive attachment style. You already had your preoccupied attachment style, but this massive stressor made it 1,000 times worse. So she basically freaked out and said, I just cannot deal with this now, and it's over, like, for us focusing on our relationship because I need to deal with this massive stressor. And this happens, like when a parent dies or when somebody's diagnosed with a medical condition or a child is diagnosed with a medical condition. It obviously amplifies the pre-existing dysfunction in the marriage because everybody now is under stress. So hopefully you could take what the therapist says seriously, work on figuring out why you're anxiously attached in the first place, why you were drawn to somebody with dismissive attachment, right? So in your upbringing, there was likely a caregiver that was warm, but you could not predict when you could be close to them. That's how preoccupied slash avoidant, slash anxious attachment is created. There's a caregiver that you love, that loves you, but they are either depressed, they're addicted, they have other children that they're super busy with, there's financial stress, whatever it is, you cannot get comfort at the times that you need comfort. And you could read and listen to all my stuff on attachment on the Dr. Psych Mom show, all the stuff I've written on drpsychmom.com. So basically then in that situation, the child becomes hypervigilant. They're tracking the parent and hoping for, the parent to have some time for them. Because the parent's time and attention and bandwidth is so limited, then in adulthood, they're drawn to the same familiar dynamic. They link up with somebody avoidant because it makes sense to them. It's familiar to never be able to get as much attention slash focus as you need. And to kind of follow that person around, asking for more reassurance, attachment, to kind of fill up this black hole that was created in childhood through no fault of anybody's, right? And so individual therapy is great. Make sure you're going back into family of origin. Make sure it's not this ChatGPT style therapy that I'm talking about, where they basically say, oh, you're right, she's just cold, she's just difficult, where like support groups do that same kind of thing. So it's all the same kind of person. You're like, oh yeah, man, your wife sucks. No. You want to look inward as much as possible. And when you've actually grown more secure and more centered and calm and not been engaging in as many of the anxious behaviors, that's when you can try to figure out is this relationship working? Is it for you? And you can say, if we're going to stay married, I need us to be in couples therapy. We obviously do not engage in a way that we want our daughter to act in relationships. We want to provide a loving, close template for a marriage, right? And if she wants to stay married and values your child growing up in a healthy home, then, and if she's seeing that you're already doing your own work on trying to grow more secure yourself, then she will go to therapy, right? So people who say my wife won't go to couples therapy, they asked like one time, crying, hysterical, and then she's like, stop it, you need your own therapy. And it's the same for the gender inverse. If a person wants to stay married and you say that that's what you need to stay married and this is going to be good for our kids and I'm scheduling on Tuesday, they will come, unless they don't want to be married. And if she doesn't want to be married, then she doesn't want to be married, and then you have to figure that stuff out for yourself and what that looks like moving forward. All right. Hi, David. And hi to everybody who's watching. I'll probably post this as a podcast later. And if y'all have any questions, I'm here for like 5 more minutes and I can answer some questions if you have. We do have the Facebook secret group. I hope that you guys all join that. That's the blue subscribe button and it's in a comment under every post. It's automatically added with a link to the secret group. People have asked me always for years about, I don't like my friends or family seeing what I post, on your page, but I want to engage on the topics. And the way to do that is to join the private secret group where the only people that see your comments are other people who are, paying. It's $4.99 a month. So it's about as cheap as you can get. Danny says, thank you. I'm working on this stuff. I'm in real therapy, working on myself, learning about the styles and becoming secure myself again, like I was before the diagnosis, but it's been a while and I'm becoming and showing more secure. She's in therapy herself, but we haven't gotten into couples. I'll make the couples appointment. Thanks for answering my question. You're welcome. That sounds good, It sounds good. But remember, Danny, maybe a blind spot. You could talk about this with your therapist. If she was dismissive for 16 years, you were preoccupied for 16 years. That's just how it works, they just interlock, If you were a secure guy, you wouldn't have been attracted to and stayed with a dismissive, avoidant woman, right? So the secure people don't stay with the anxiously attached or with the avoidant people. They find each other, right? They find each other. But the other ones also find each other, the insecurely attached styles. So the insecurely attached styles are preoccupied / anxious, however you say it, avoidant or dismissive avoidant, as you say, and fearful avoidant, which is the one where things are very chaotic and volatile due to childhood trauma. But remember, it's not like she was dismissive all these years and you were awesomely secure, right? You were the pursuer, she was the distancer. That's how that rolled. You guys were interlocking. And so you got to think about not her. She didn't make you preoccupied. The medical condition didn't make you preoccupied of your daughter. Your life and your early experiences provided the template for your own attachment style that predates her. And that could be the big epiphany that allows you to move forward, really looking internally with that motivation to improve yourself versus to improve yourself so she changes. No, you want to look in at yourself, just you, like what in your early life led to that. Some people don't want to throw their parents under the bus or blame their parents. Your parents loved you. That's fine. Great. Your parents, I'm sure, are good people. However, nobody's perfect, right? So you got to feel like you have a good handle on why that stuff developed, whether it was the marriage you witnessed, how you were treated individually, birth order, their sibling stressors, financial stressors, like what was going on that took your caregiver away from you and away from giving you contingent attachment and affection when you needed it, and then made you into somebody who would seek that and try to get blood from a stone in your relationships. All right, guys, gotta go. This was useful live, hopefully. And remember, join my secret group. If you ever need therapy or coaching, reach out. My group practice is bestlifebehavioralhealth.com. You can also email me, Samantha@drpsychmom.com. I have very few slots, but I still do therapy and coaching. And I have 12 people working in my practice, therapists and coaches, people that I personally vet and that are great and that are much more affordable than me as well. And Nick here says, just a plug, as a former member, the secret group is a great place for spilling it and getting real life feedback. Not therapy, but support and perspectives in an absolute judgment-free zone. Thank you, Nick. It is. I mean, that's a really great testimonial about the group. And the group has really, I have a high bar for intelligence, and it has a lot of smart people in there. Even just a small paywall makes people so much more motivated to really engage, you know? That's why they used to have us, even as trainee therapists, we had to charge at UMD, at the psychology clinic, the training clinic where I got my doctorate, we had to charge even $5 or $10, because if people pay for something, they feel a lot more invested than if they get it for free, you know, and then they show up more, and there's less no-shows, and there's more commitment. So even just like $4.99 for the Facebook group means that people actually want to engage in there in a productive way. So there's no trolls, nothing. All right, talk to y'all soon. Bye-bye.